Thank you so much for joining on the panel, and thank all of you for being here today. Most of you, or all of you, should have this booklet, so I don't want to offend our panelists by not reading how accomplished they are. So while you're sitting there, if you could look through the booklet, you will agree with me that we have an extremely accomplished panel today, which is all around the topic called Leading the Pack. So they're not wolves, no. But they will share sort of best practices, challenges, and open up, hopefully, some shared learnings for all of you to take back to your companies, or hopefully it'll influence the way that you give. And so what I thought would be useful for us to open with is to just have each of your perspectives very much in your own companies. How have you structured it? How has your journey been, and what is the giving, whether it's CSR or philanthropy or however you would like to label it? How is it structured in each of your organizations? Why don't we start with our lone man?
Yeah, thank you so much, Dasra, for calling a man. Otherwise, if there's all women think, they will think it's cruel men who just chase 100% profit. It's a kind women who come and take care of the 2%. So thank you so much for bringing it. And now to something more. I know I'm playing with words, but this is what I strongly feel. The word CSR, corporate social responsibility, and I struggle with that word. We in corporates, and I'm talking from a corporate context, taking care of our shareholder we consider as corporate responsibility. Taking care of our customers we consider as our corporate responsibility. Taking care of our employees we consider as corporate responsibility. We don't doubt it. Taking care of even vendors we take it on responsibility. But when it comes to society, we call it corporate social responsibility, as though all the earlier things were anti-social. The point I'm bringing out is corporate social responsibility as a thing, taking care of society is as much a corporate responsibility of corporates as taking care of shareholders and stakeholders thing. So I think, for example, in Cummins, we don't call it CSR. We call it a proper corporate responsibility, because this is not an optional subject, an elective that you choose. Oh, I do all these things. If I have time and money left, I'll take care of the society. No, it's an integral part. So I think we also need to start acknowledging that this is not an add-on module. This is a part of our conduct, part of our curriculum, part of our journey. Now, I will, we heard the session. I had part of it about this talk, and a lot of corporates, and I'm very heavily involved in CII, a lot of us in corporate world are saying, oh my God, what is government doing in direct taxing, taking 2% away? And I think I was personally disappointed. It's very disappointing. First of all, there are 8 lakh entities in the country. This 2% will apply only to 16,000 of them. So only 2% of corporates are going to be affected by this law. And we're talking about 2% of their profit, not their turnover. We go ahead and concede 1% increase in excise duty, 2% increase in VAT, put our tail between our legs and accept it. And when it comes to 2% of profit, 98% is still with you. The corporates have made a lot of noise. Oh my God, they're stealing away money from us. And I think I just want to bring, representing the corporate, that I think we have overreacted. We have made it appear as though somebody's taking away our money. Sorry, this was money or this spend ought to have belonged from our side to the society, so that's the context. I'll just take, since you asked about I work for Cummins, we're based in Pune. Cummins is a global organization, a footprint, and our CSR, and I think a few learnings which I can just share, which is true for not only manufacturing, any perspective. First of all, I think corporates like ours, like any corporate, should focus. We shouldn't try and solve world's problem. We shouldn't even try to solve India's problem. Manmohan Singh and his cabinet is supposed to do that. You need to focus, you need to be precise. Cummins has picked up, for example, energy, environment, and 3 items, which is thing. We can't solve. 2, it needs to be linked to something that you do. You need to add value to it. If Cummins starts pretending that we'll solve young adolescent women's health problem in villages, we don't know nothing. I'd rather do something which relates to energy, environment, something that we understand we can possibly add value to things. So that third, we must make our things simple, replicable, scalable. We're trying to we did, for example, a solid waste disposal. We picked up one of the 98 wards in the city of Pune, and we made it, waste-free. Solid waste disposal we contributed. We didn't want to solve, Pune Municipal Corporation should do it. I worked personally along with CII and as Cummins on solving the Pune power load shedding problem. Everybody said, why don't you look at India? I said, that is Sushil Kumar Sindhe's responsibility. He was the energy minister. Then why don't you look at Maharashtra? I said, it was the Maharashtra chief minister. I did for my city. So I think it's important for corporates to recognize when they address any issue on societal, they must be very, very precise, focused, put the critical mass, take it to its logical conclusion, not try and solve, I'm solving education problem for the country. Maybe you can in steps. The third thing is, which I have experienced outcome, is we do it in physical proximity of where we are. The reason are twofold. One, you can make an impact. Secondly, 100% of projects that Cummins picks up in CSR, and it's a rule for us, we pick up those where we can get our employees engaged. Because on the one hand, CSR makes an impact to the society, which it's supposed to be, but what it does to your employees is unbelievable. They become sensitive, caring, more wholesome human beings. So every single project that we pick up, we insist and ensure that our employees get involved some way, whether it was solid waste disposal or ITI upgradation or a water problem in London Village in Fulton area. Every place we get our employees involved. We have a measure by which company gives so many hours a year on office time where people can work. It does unbelievable amount of positive rub-off on the employees. And lastly, I would want to say, in this context, my learning, my own experience, we spent in corporates, spend a lot of time doing vendor development. We develop our vendors so much because we work with them. We believe that their strength and competence is going to help us. Why don't we in corporates start owning up our partners called NGO and help develop them? It is not an upkar, it's not a favor. It's just the way you don't do upkar or favor to your vendor. You make it an easy partnership. So building capacity and capabilities in NGOs is something which we corporates, we always pretend, we always say we understand systems, we understand processes, we are very efficient, we know how to manage resources. Thank you very much. Do it with your partner. Can you not work with the NGOs and see that their capability and capacity improves? Our language, our bhasha, and the language that corporates do, NGOs do is different. Help them do. And finally, I just want to close here. This 2% discussion, you can't mandate, you can mandate marriage, but you can't mandate happiness. You can mandate ceasefire, but you can't mandate peace. You can mandate alliances we have seen, but you can't ensure convergence. So this is like, forgive me for using the word dhan, man dhan. You know, this is the dhan part, this is the money part that you can do, but you need to involve yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically for a wholesome CSR. It's not writing checks. So I think this whole story, we can go through statute, clauses, compliance, all the questions that you asked earlier in the day. Thank you very much. I think we need to involve ourselves and treat it as our responsibility. And there's a joy, happiness, and I can say, and I'm using the last statement in this, this is women's thing. Cummins has, for example, picked up the women's agenda. There's a College of Engineering for Women in Pune called Cummins College of Engineering. We're supporting it totally, not by writing checks, by having those students come and do internship, our people going and doing faculty, setting up departments, giving equipment. We're setting up a Cummins College of Engineering for Women in Nagpur now, completely, because we believe one of our responsibility is, once again, not selfless. Women employees of ours, we have gone to 22% diversity, gender diversity from 2%. They're much better people. And I'm saying this not because I'm surrounded by 3 women who beat me up, but I'm saying, genuinely speaking, they do a much better job anyway. So we're doing this, and that's one of the things. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Pradeep. One very important point you said that companies can take more responsibility in building the capacity of NGOs. So I think that's a great segue to really, Vidya, to hear from you and Edelgive Foundation, because I know that you do quite a holistic approach to supporting the organizations that you do.
Yeah, so Edelgive Foundation is the philanthropic arm of the Edelweiss Group, which is a large diversified financial services company. And our journey has been sort of very interesting because right from the beginning, our approach was to be philanthropically minded. So we did always give 1% of our pre-tax profits to philanthropy. It was always allocated. But like most corporates, it began as check writing. It was unstructured. We met a few organizations along the way. We liked the work, and we would write a check. It was my responsibility at that time because I was CFO and I was managing that allocation. And one of the things I did around 2005, 2006, when I had a little more time on hands, we were going to be IPOing in the following year, and I was going to be stepping down as CFO. So I had a little more time on my hands. So I come from the business side of corporate life. And I started visiting some of the NGOs that we had funded. And I think that was when really there was a great change that came over my approach to how to do philanthropy in a more structured and meaningful way. I went to Nagpur, I went to Sholapur, I went to Calcutta, I visited all the NGOs we had supported in Mumbai. And the theme was just absolutely universally common. Everybody doing excellent work. There was absolutely no issues around integrity. The problems were around the organization itself, the NGO itself. And Edelweiss's own journey has been very entrepreneurial. We ourselves have grown from almost nothing to where we are today. And along the way, we've helped a number of entrepreneurs on the for-profit side really build businesses, raise money for M&As, IPOs, and played crucially an advisor as well to them. And I felt we could really use that approach that we had developed on the for-profit side to the non-profit side as well, because the issues are really the same. And with that in mind, really, we structured a foundation that would provide funding as well as capacity building support. And we structured the capacity building support such that it was very focused on 4 verticals. Again, these are terms that everybody in the audience will understand: strategy and planning, human resources, technology systems and processes, and financial and fundraising sustainability. The reason we chose education and livelihoods as our sectors with an underlying theme of women's empowerment and focus on the girl child was because it resonated with who we are as Edelweiss, as our employees. All of them come from very middle-class backgrounds. Education has played a huge role in their own lives. Average age of our organization is 26. And it just made so much sense when we asked employees this, this is what really captures their imagination. And women's empowerment, because that was my particular pet theme, and I sort of got to choose that. But I think what also we ended up doing is, because of the capacity building theme we adopted very early on, we enabled another sort of objective of ours, which was to embed philanthropy within Edelweiss. Which is something that Pradeep also spoke about, which is, how do you get employees to become more philanthropically minded? And all our capacity building work gets executed pro bono by Edelweiss employees. So we've managed really to, do what we set out to do. And the idea now is to build a platform that enables a lot of NGOs, particularly in the small to medium size, who really need that support before they can go off and scale and become much larger. But that early stage support that is really, really needed when an NGO is between the size of about 50 lakhs to about 3 crores annual budgets is where, support is absolutely absent on the capacity building side. And that's really what we've done.
Great, thank you, Vidya. Why don't we jump quickly? You've been waiting so patiently, Svetlana, and I know that Novartis has done some really landmark things. So please share.
Sure, and to take off from where Pradeep spoke about moving from corporate social responsibility to corporate responsibility, that's exactly where Novartis is today, and we've renamed our CSR to be corporate responsibility. I think the way things have moved today is from nice to do to need to do. And I don't think it's an option. We at Novartis believe that it's possible to do well by doing good. And we have several approaches. Among them is one approach which I'd like to share with you, which is where we believe in a shared value approach. And we have an initiative called Arogya Parivar, which simply means healthy family. And there we have 2 arms. So there's a commercial arm, where because we believe that for anything to be sustainable, it must provide a return. But it's not along the lines of our pure commercial pharmaceuticals. So this is a social business, if you like. And we have an education arm where we are raising health awareness. And why do we think that's important? Because if you go into rural India, you'll find that a lot of the problems are because of the lack of health awareness. So to give you a simple example, the woman of the family is the last to eat, right? And what happens if she's a pregnant woman? It means that she doesn't get enough nourishment. And if she doesn't get enough nourishment, the baby in her womb doesn't get enough nourishment. So we are looking at creating health awareness. We are currently in 10 states. In the last 4 years, we have actually diagnosed 450,000 people. We've created health awareness among 10 million people in these 10 states. And these are not just figures that I am throwing. These are figures that are recorded. So we actually record the number of people that we cover in each of these health awareness camps. We create employment opportunities for people in these villages because we pick people from these villages, train them as health educators, so that education happens in the local dialect. We believe that is important because it's not enough if people from the cities go to the rural areas and talk to them about health awareness. The acceptance level is far more if one among them talks to them. So that we feel is one approach. We also have, of course, the pure philanthropy where we donate medicines. So for example, Novartis donates the global supply of leprosy medicines. So we do not charge for leprosy medicines anywhere in the world. This is a donation made through the WHO, and 60% of that donation comes back to India through WHO. So this is, of course, one part of it. We manufacture these medicines in India, make the donation through WHO, but this is pure philanthropy.
Great.
Is this working? Yes. Thank you. So now that we sort of have three of the perspectives, what I want to do for the Q&A for all of you is if you could write it on a piece of paper. We have Dasra folks walking around, and they'll collect those papers. And if you can just write on it for whom it is, and then at the end of our panel discussion, we'll open it up with the questions that you share with me. So I think after having sort of three of your perspectives, it would be useful now if we can sort of pull away from your own specific work, which was great to hear, and a little bit of a sector approach, because I know that there's a lot of discussion that certain sectors can, do certain things in a better way. And we have three very strong sectors that you all represent. We have manufacturing with Pradeep, pharmaceuticals with Svetlana, and Vidya with financial services. So a little bit of perspective and guidance that, if I'm a company sitting in a sector that you're in, what are some of the things that they should be keeping in mind? And if you can speak to how it might align with the business in a shared value approach, or maybe not at all.
I'll pick it up. I want to pick up from what Vidya said. I think you used a very nice word. The thing should resonate either with the employees or with the business. And I think this resonance is important. For us, for example, in manufacturing, when we've been looking at various projects, we went to a small, and I'm giving this from a sector, we went to a small place called Fulton, a small village near Baramati, and they said the problem out there is health and primary school education. We were not seeking votes, we were not looking for constituency. We said, no, we can help in higher education, we can help in technical education, ITIs, polytechnics. We started doing that because that resonated with us. We were able to add value to that ITI, that polytechnic, and an engineering college in Fulton, because that's where we understand a little more. So the answer to your question is each of our sectors have certain competences, which with the incremental effort can make big value. We went to, again, illustrating by Cummins' example, I'm just giving something, using agriculture waste for energy generation. We are in energy business, we make engines, we make diesel engines and gas engines. But this is an area we understand. So we've done pilots in Maharashtra, in Orissa, elsewhere, where using agriculture waste to convert that into energy for the purpose of utilization at self-generation and consumption. We've been using our technological base in terms of even designs of a chula. So manufacturing industry, fortunately, is technology intensive. It doesn't have to be high-tech stuff, but a lot of needs of the society around us require technological solution. They require financial solutions, I understand, which I think you're going to talk about. But these little adaptations of technology, manufacturing sector can do it absolutely, absolutely with incremental effort, but hell of a lot of joy and fulfillment. So if adopt the technical challenges in a company, whether it's anything got to do with where technology can be brought in, which you understand. So that's what manufacturing sector can. The other thing which I think manufacturing sector can do and is doing, for example, we're doing, etc., is in developing skills of the types that the vendors need. We have all in-house training programs. We give the highest training. We send our people, the fancy guys go to, I wouldn't say Harvard, but I mean, they're sent abroad for very fancy courses, and we do all that. But when it comes to the vendors and their skill levels, and they struggle, the retention is a challenge, their skill level is a challenge. So I think, don't call it CSR, call it whatever else it is, but then adding value to those, skilling of those people with you is another area where manufacturing can do, because manufacturing, by its very definition, is skill intensive, which can be related with another area. So these are the two areas where I thought manufacturing sector can certainly contribute, but resonance is important. You need to be able to relate to it. And huge experiences that we have in GE earlier and now with Cummins, it works.
Vidya, you're nodding.
Yeah, actually, the resonance, like Pradeep was saying, happens with our employees when it comes to the capacity building work that we do. Because again, these are things that everybody internally within Edelweiss is very familiar with. So, we get immense participation across the board. It's not just the HR people who are doing HR-related projects, but there are lots of other people who are working on leadership-related work for some of the nonprofits we've worked for. But I think one of the things we started looking at a few years ago as part of our livelihoods program was actually financial inclusion, because it made absolute sense for an organization who's in the financial services business to look at it. And we started looking at it not from, not only because we understood it, but because we felt that it was a very important adjunct to the livelihoods practice that we had. A lot of the work that we'd done around livelihoods, whether it was skill building or whether it was providing access to the rural poor to government schemes like NREGA and so on, most of the work threw up time and again the complete absence of the availability of good, relevant financial products for that market. And so we started doing a few pilots. We started with financial literacy, so using our existing nonprofits whose primary mandate was probably education or some other livelihood projects, we used those NGOs to really spread the financial literacy program that we developed internally. And the second thing we started doing it is looking at the availability not only of savings products, but also of credit, insurance, and other social security programs to the very, very poor. I mean, the kind of population that even microfinance does not touch. So we have a very successful program in Rajasthan that we are running, which provides mini micro loans of about 2,000 to 8,000 rupees a pop. But it needs grant making. So that is really important. How does a foundation like ours look not only at financial inclusion from a business side, but provide the right kind of assistance to NGOs who are in the position to provide the kind of financial inclusion that's needed for that population. So we believe that a lot of the absolute rural poor need grant making initially, which organizations like ours understand, because we bring both the foundation side and the business expertise side. So that's something we've done as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Svetlana, with what?
Coming from the healthcare sector, the reason we look at healthcare is because that's what we understand best, right? And we look at education because we believe education and healthcare go hand in hand. And if I could share some anecdotes with you. So for example, we were in a village about 100 kilometers away from Varanasi, and there was a child who had been bitten by a dog. And instead of getting an anti-rabies vaccine, what these people were doing, they had put a mixture of turmeric and chili powder on the wound. They were taking 7 rounds of the village well, and they believed everything would be fine with the child. And needless to say, this child a few days later was dead. So we believe awareness is very important. We believe that healthcare companies need to take healthcare to the people, because in a country like ours, healthcare infrastructure is sadly lacking. And we cannot expect people in rural India to come to the towns and cities for healthcare. So we need to partner with government, collaborate with other healthcare companies, collaborate with NGOs to take healthcare to the people. And I think unless we do that, whatever we do will be but a drop in the ocean.
And so all three of you, there's a theme, right? So you do what you're good at. So can you answer a bit, is that a bit of a cop-out? I mean, isn't it easy for you to do as a company what you're good at? And at the same time, if you can speak to, it's obvious and common sense that that helps, but where can you break away from it? And where have you potentially failed is one of the questions that we have from the audience, that where have you found that this sometimes actually doesn't work? And if you can add into the response to this question, how do you see the role of the NGO and the nonprofit in all of this? Because there's few of you who will directly go and do this yourselves in the community. Anyone?
I don't think it's a cop-out at all, because it's all about economies of scale or building efficiencies. At the end of the day, I think we are looking at what is not there, and then we are figuring out how best we can provide a solution to it. So when we started our work, it was very clear that nonprofits needed capacity building support, and I think even Dasra would agree through its own work that it has been doing over so many years. And we felt that we were in the position to provide that, not because we knew the answers, but because we had experimented and found some sort of themes that were common on the for-profit side that we thought we could bring in the non-profit side. But it has been a very difficult journey as well. I think it seems as if financial inclusion, some of the work that we've done around financial inclusion or capacity building work should be easy, should be obvious, but it never is. I think one thing is, on the for-profit side, there is a huge incentive. There's an economic incentive to grow, to scale, to become more efficient. The shareholders, your customers, everybody demands it of you. On the for-profit side, to find those incentives is relatively difficult. And you have to work very closely with founders and the senior team to actually evangelize in a sense, and to do it in a partnership way without sort of coming from a point that I know what is your problem and I have the solution to it. So building that bridge, building that partnership approach is much harder than it seems. And even getting employees to give their time is also not easy. I think anybody who has a great employee engagement program will speak about the struggles around it, and will speak about the need to build a program that really resonates, and finding that win-win. Similarly, in financial inclusion, I think for me internally to go to Edelweiss Tokyo Life Insurance and say, please create a product for me that makes absolute sense to somebody who has a 10,000 annual income, which is a savings come insurance product, is very, very difficult. It took us 6 months just to get IRDA approval. But to find that, I mean, it may be our core competence, but delivering on that is nevertheless quite tough.
Yeah. I'll say we all start with the comfort zone. And comfort not in a derogatory sense. Comfort zone is your competence zone where you're able to do. But sometimes you find that what you put in doesn't lead to results because want of some other inputs. I'll give you 2 illustrations. We were doing an ITI adoption in Fulton, and we were supposed to provide support in terms of teachers, training, equipment, etc. And we suddenly find that they don't have power. So we provide a genset. We were doing work in a village for the skill development. They said they don't have water, so we created a tank fund. Incremental. Those are not our areas. I mean, creating water solution wasn't part of Kamal's expertise. So sometimes you get into challenges where you find your effort is not going to be giving the results, and you get into the allied areas, and we partnered with some NGOs, etc. The important challenge, really speaking and putting, is not about a comfort zone, it's about sustainability. And quite often we struggle, we start a project with great intents, the local leadership, whether there's a sarpanch out in a village, when it comes to village, when it comes to another institution, which is your anath ashram or whatever else you're doing, there because sustainability becomes a challenge, and I think that's where a whole lot of us struggle. So most of the time we are looking at projects which we can see through with the visibility of a sustained critical mass delivering results. And it just does work.
And I think a challenge that we've come across is what someone mentioned in the earlier session, is where there is sometimes a reluctance on the part of NGOs to collaborate as well.
Yeah.
And so we find that when we are working in certain areas, we find that we would like them to partner with others so we can leverage the work we're doing. And we do meet a challenge, we meet with a challenge over there because there is a reluctance. And I'm not so sure how we can overcome that, but there is a certain amount of reluctance.
Can you just build on that? There's a question from the audience on, as an NGO, what can they do to be more, how can they raise funds from the corporate sector? What can they do better?
Yeah, may I?
Please.
Corporate sector isn't a bank from whom you raise funds. Corporate sector is an institution which presumably, hopefully, is having the desire to do something. They need the support and help, because corporate sector cannot pretend that it understands, has a hand on the pulse of the society. NGOs do. So if you're trying to do something to reach the society, NGOs becomes your partner. So NGOs and corporates need to work as partnership, not just as a fund provider. As I said, fund providing is one aspect of it. Now, there's a challenge, the language, and I'm not about English, Hindi language. The languages that NGOs speak and the languages that corporates speak and are comfortable with. We want payback period, we want discounted cash flows, we want priorities, and we work on this. NGO says, I'm doing this, they work from the heart. I mean, they get all over and say, no, that was not in the scope of the project. And they say, no, but this is required. This is an engagement you need to do. So I think it's a question of engaging, building on each other's strength. And the answer to your question, I think we can do a lot, starting with project writing itself. How do you make a proposal so that somebody like a corporate can fund, somebody like a financial institution? So starting with that, project management, project monitoring, in terms of telling them to contain their scope to what was originally done. They go all over, and they're lovely people. I mean, they just get driven by the need. So I think that level of engagement, both corporates and NGOs can engage. I mean, funding is one aspect. At least Cummins hasn't done anything where our people are not involved, where there is a sense of engagement. Writing a check used to be practiced earlier, but I don't think that's the right thing. Of course, when it comes to Uttarakhand disaster, that's a different matter. There you can't do, you just have to write a check. But most other things have to be combined partnerships.
So we have a session in the afternoon on how to pick an NGO, but I think it's relevant maybe from both your perspectives. What are some of the critical things that you're looking at from your own perspective? Maybe not only just funding, but what else is, or a good proposal, what else?
I'd just like to add a little bit to what Pradeep said. I think, the era of how NGOs raised funds has really changed significantly. Yeah. I realized 2 years ago that a lot of the NGOs, particularly who've been around, say, since the 70s or the 80s, even the early 90s, were very used to a very paper-based approach. So they knew how to write plans. They knew exactly what a USAID or a DFID wanted as far as proposal was required. They'd had that expertise, but it was also a very impersonal approach because you sent in your plan and it got approved and things got done and you possibly met them once a year and that was it. I think things have changed very, very much, particularly because corporates have now started participating in philanthropy in a lot more active way. So one of the things I tell some of my nonprofits, and I actually look for it as well when we evaluate them, is how is the founder really spending his time? If you see a corporate CEO or a corporate senior manager will spend 50% of his time perhaps with clients and 50% just worrying about HR, generally. I think those are the top two sort of priorities of CEOs. You find NGO founders not doing that. You find them still spending perhaps 80 to 90% of their time on the program. because the second line hasn't developed so that
Yeah.
there are program managers, there are impact assessors, and there's a whole host of the team, so he or she should be spending 20 to 30% of their time on the program, and it actually is very different. So one of the things we definitely look for is how is the founder really spending the time. And then there are the other things like, for example, the quality of the program, whether there are impact measurement systems, and as a result of doing all of that, actually, when we look at funding that NGO, we actually also start building where our capacity building support will start getting focused. So it helps us in both ways.
At Novartis, the way we look at fundraising also for NGOs is we've moved away from check writing, absolutely. So we look at how can we partner with the NGO, where is it that we can work together to make a difference, and how can we engage our employees in what we are doing? Because if that employee engagement is not there, like Vidya said, the resonance doesn't happen. And so that becomes very, very important. I mean, even in terms of, even if it's something as simple as giving a scholarship to an institute, even there we look for the resonance. And if I can share, it's quite a funny anecdote actually, but we give a part scholarship to 3 meritorious women at the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad. And it's quite funny, but when we took the decision, we had a discussion internally, and there was our country president, a male, there was the CCFO, a woman, and there was me. And so we were 2 women and 1 man. And guess what? The man was in favor of giving it to women, and the women were on merit. Mm-hmm. So we were, why don't we give it purely on merit, and why should this be just earmarked for women? And then, of course, what our country president said to us was, he said, you know what, in a country like India, if a family has limited resources and 2 children, a girl and a boy, who do you think the funding will go to for higher education? Mm-hmm. That was the end of the discussion. And it went to meritorious women. So it must resonate, and I think it's important to take everybody with you. So it's important to have the discussion for everybody to come to the same table.
And that leads very nicely sort of to my next question, which we sort of discussed in the back room a bit about, which was how do you see the role of leadership, around the issue of CSR and sort of giving? And each of you have come from different angles, and it's structured in different ways. And so one of the questions from the audience was, how do you navigate within the organization itself to ultimately sort of achieve the outcomes?
I'll pitch first. In Cummins, what we did, any presentation to the leadership with respect to CSR project, initially the HR guy would get up and say, we have done this. So we made it known the BU leader will give the presentation. So, I mean, it's mechanics, but it just brings in that the BU leader gets up and gives a presentation to the top leadership as to what has been the project. It automatically gets involved. If there is, the large number of BUs. So that's one way of engaging. And you're absolutely right. Unless the HR and some CSR department do that for a living, and I'm not being derogatory. I mean, that's the part of the job description. But unless the leadership accepts it and does it and is driven into it, it doesn't work out. There'll be reasons. So that's at least one of the ways we did that.
In fact, at Novartis, also, for example, I spoke about Arogya Parivar. I may add here that the country head for Arogya Parivar sits on the country executive committee. So he's a part of the decision-making leadership team. Any philanthropic donations, purely medicine donations, again, sits in the business, in the respective businesses. So decisions are taken at the leadership level.
Yeah, I think one of the things we did is, when we began thinking about structuring a foundation, we ensured we had board approval, and we ensured that the very senior executives of Edelweiss were on board to doing this, because this was long before anything was mandated. And it was a significant budget. It has been always a significant budget for us. The other thing we've done is sort of so our investment committee also has senior Edelweiss people. So we're not sort of somebody just sitting off unconnected with the rest of the organization. It's an intrinsic part of Edelweiss. And the third thing we've done is that we've ensured that a lot of the capacity building work builds into the leadership work that Edelweiss is doing anyway for its own employees. So we have 3 leadership levels. We have emerging leaders, advancing leaders, and senior leaders. And each leadership category actually engages with Edelgive in a very creative way so that their own leadership qualities get enhanced, because we believe that the EQ development comes through working with Edelgive, and it's something that everybody internally, not just HR, but even employees are very excited about, because they see that this is an important way in which they themselves will develop as leaders.
And if we can just extend some of this leadership conversation, there's a question from the audience around how can the corporate sector engage with the government a lot better. And I know that some of the convenings that Dasra does, it's actually difficult. You'll talk about public-private partnership, but there actually won't be a private sector voice there at a senior level that you can have the influence you need if you look at the corresponding government side. So the NGOs, I think, are definitely trying to work with the government, but are you seeing a change from your own companies or some of the CSR Act requirements now that might bring the two closer together? Because really that's where we're going to start to achieve scale.
Yes, at least at Novartis, we are engaging with the state governments because health is a state subject. And so, for example, if I talk about leprosy, where we pioneered a self-care kit, we have partnered with the governments to say that we would like to give this to you and through you to people suffering from leprosy. And we found that a lot of state governments are willing to partner with you on this. We haven't been as successful with Arogya Parivar, although there we're actually working in the rural hinterland, but we are still at it, and we hope that we will eventually partner with government because their reach is far wider than ours could ever be.
So our engagement currently is sort of a shadow engagement, because we found that most engagement with government actually takes the form of advocacy, and when it comes to corporates, there isn't that much trust between government and corporates when it comes to social issues. And we feel, therefore, that NGOs and nonprofits are actually best placed to play the role of advocacy. A lot of NGOs do that, but unfortunately don't have budgets, or they don't have a clear strategy. And we come in and help create those budgets, in some cases fund it, and in some cases also help jointly develop the strategy for advocacy.
My own experience, and I'm glad Rati is here, we worked something with the government of Maharashtra and so on.
She asked the question, actually.
Yeah, she asked a question. So lovely. No, because, and this is one of the things that a whole lot of us in Pune, for example, corporates work together. We struggle, quite honestly, and I'm not nervous about being quoted, but I worked for the government of India for 10 years before I came to private sector, so I'm talking. There is an element of government believes they dispense, they make a policy and they dispense. Partnership with them is a big challenge. Honestly, it's a big challenge, even if you are trying to work for a cause which is part of a government's agreed program. They used to NGOs who will come to them with a proposal and they will say, okay, I'll give you this much money. That's what they understand, and send me a report. So I believe that we need to work with them, to your point. They have a much wider scope. We can't reach some of the things. Take up ITI partnership, adoption of ITI as one of the agenda, etc. We're struggling with the government system, whole lot of us. There are some enlightened governments, which we did in Goa, an amazing government response. We worked so much in partnership. We've trained every single ITI in Goa. We're struggling with, in our own state, in some state. Answer to your question is, theoretically, you can work with government. Practically, it's a question of who you are dealing with, what and how long that he or she is going to be in that role, because there's again this constant movement, which makes it very difficult. Some civil servant says and it gets transferred. So we were struggling. But partnership with NGOs can be more permanent in nature, and frankly, we should use government only as a, if we have to, and not necessarily, and I know I'm not sounding very polite here, but we've been struggling in our partnership with the government in most cases.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Speaking of partnership, there's a question, why is it that often corporates will ask NGOs to partner, but you never see corporates partner?
Corporates among themselves? No, I just mentioned, We've partnered,
Okay, yeah.
we've
Good
done
example.
a lot of
But
joint
it's-
partnership in skill development, in vocational skill, employability skills, affirmative action.
With
400
other,
partners
with
are-
other corporates.
With other corporates.
What's worked?
What
What's allowed
works?
you to do that so that
Like-minded
others can?
thought process, leadership's commitment to that concept, and in fact, it synergizes. I mean, as Rati is here, and there are a whole lot of corporates. In Pune, we have tried 3-4 models where corporates are working together, not to improve their profitability, no. We're talking about corporates working together for a societal cause. My Pune Power model, by which we made Pune zero load shedding, worked because 30 companies in the city of Pune collaborated, decided to work together and use their gensets so that the city of Pune has zero load shedding. It worked for 5 years. We, in Pune affirmative action, there are 20 of our companies which are working together to skill SC/ST students. We're doing it. So corporates works. Again, we just need to have a cause which is dear to all of them. So this belief that corporates can't work together, and that was a question asked earlier in the day. Now, accounting-wise, we'll get into CSR, I'm not getting into it. But like-minded causes, it works.
That's true, because even among us, healthcare companies, we are partnering together and working on a program looking at maternal and child mortality. So again, it's a bunch of corporates that have come together to
All
do
pharma,
that.
pharma
All
business.
pharma companies.
Actually, some of them are competitors working together.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've also found that because I think there's Anis from Siemens here. We're working jointly together on a project where it works very well actually when there are complementary skills also that you can bring. So for example, Siemens is a leader in solar power and not that we had any expertise, but we were looking at water, so we could bring the two together, and we now begun to look at the project and expand it by working together and bringing other skills as well. I think the problem is how do we get nonprofits all to start thinking from that point of view? How do you create those synergies among donors, from the nonprofits point of view? And if that starts happening, especially with the CSR bill, I think you'll see a lot more efficiency taking place.
And if you think about moving from this to accountability, do you see this new act that's come as potentially a way to have corporates be more accountable with the work that they're doing? So we're requiring NGOs to be accountable on a number of different metrics. We're getting better at doing it from this side. But do you feel that we could step up the level of accountability on the company side, and any lessons you might have or best practices?
I think a lot of us, especially if I speak for the panel, I think we've not really struggled with our own accountability. We have struggled with helping, at least we have at Edelgave, struggled with working with our nonprofits, develop good metrics of measurement. It's also partly because, we did not have the expertise. It's taken us time to really learn and figure out, because it's not as easy as corporate measurement of corporate performance. I mean, that's a little more, I think, much more simplistic compared to when you look at societal issues and when you want to do a blend of both quantitative and qualitative, and especially over the long term when you're looking at what happens to people's lives over a fairly long period of time. So our struggle has been to sort of amalgamate that accountability into our own accountability to the people from whom we get the money. So that's really been our struggle. And I think the Act will actually help quite a bit, because it will force us, through us, it will force a lot of other nonprofits also to think actively and set aside budgets to work around measurement.
I think what it will do is force people to become more structured where there is no structure, force people to report in a uniform fashion where everyone decided otherwise, their own reporting format. I think that's what it will help to do.
Yeah, compliance. I mean, Mr. Tata didn't need 2013 bill to do CSR. There are lots of people who have been doing it. So there are lots of people who will continue to do what they're doing. This will bring in compliance, this will bring in reporting, structure, and perhaps some people who run the threshold, you will cajole them into doing this because purely by compliance. And once you do it, it becomes something that you enjoy doing because the benefits are so large, the joy is so total. I think it will become a habit as we move forward. I think it's a good thing.
Great. So just before we end, if we could have a piece of advice for the group that's starting to think about their own giving, whether from an individual or a corporate side, one own piece of advice that, you know, could be personal, and one thing that you will take away and do to really empower adolescent girls, as we really see that as one of our core focuses.
You want me to start? I think my fear about the bill actually has been that it will, what we've been doing, I think, has been, you know, an act of passion. It's been tremendous amount of investment of not just time, but our emotions and collective sort of love for what we're doing. And what the bill should not do actually to corporates is sort of make it into another sort of tick box that needs to be checked. So I think whatever we do, irrespective of the size of our budgets, if we can do it in a way that not only resonates with the organization, but we do with a lot of devotion, I think great things will happen and there'll be magic.
I think
Wait, just to answer something that you'll do that helps to empower adolescent girls, whether personally or through It'll Give, or you may already do it.
No, our portfolio in education as well as livelihoods has an underlying theme of women's empowerment and the girl child. In fact, for many years we did host an annual NGO award which just focused on organizations that worked for the girl child. A lot of our organizations, we ensure that there is a focus. There's only one organization in our entire portfolio that works only for boys. But the rest of our organizations have a very clear element of women's empowerment.
Oh, boys are important too, so we can count that. Go ahead.
Well, I've been speaking about Arogya Parivar, and we do focus a lot on women health issues over there. So sure, we would try to see that there is some amount of focus given to the adolescent girl.
And a piece of advice for those that are thinking about being more strategic.
I think go with your gut feeling, because most times we know what's right and what's right to do, so just go with your gut feel.
My advice, don't worry about the act, just go ahead with action. Don't worry about 2%. The joy, if you were to quantify, will be much more than 2% of your profit, because there is a sense of fulfillment, sense of achievement, making a difference. And as far as women thing is concerned, it's not being sort of condescending about it. It's the right thing to do, because we need to do, as they say, prashchit of what our purvaj, you know, the penance we need to do for the sins committed by things. Women have been traditionally not addressed with the respect and the dignity that they due. So our generation needs to make up for it. So, for example, we're spending more than 8 crores a year on Cummins College for Engineering for Women, which is an engineering college only for women. We're setting up, because that's the right thing to do. So, answer to your question, I think we must be more partial, a lot more pro-women oriented. Cummins doesn't do school education, we do higher education, that's a matter of thing. But my simple advice is just go ahead and do it. I think the benefits, there's a business case for it, there's an emotional case for it, and then of course there's compliance.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing your leadership through the voices here, and thank you all for listening.